Hey, what is up guys? David Zhao here, and today we're going to talk about how you can shoot product photos just like these and get results with pure white backgrounds to be compliant with e-commerce platforms' product photo requirements. And we're also going to talk about some equipment that will make your life a whole lot easier, like the Impact Photo Pro LED Booth 400, as well as some alternatives. Before we get started, I just want to talk about how pumped I am about some of the videos coming up soon on this channel, guys. We've got the M1 MacBook Air here crushing it in Final Cut Pro 10. We've also got the Hollyland Mars 400S Pro wireless video transmitter going on right now, and I'm using the Hollyland Lark 150 wireless lav system that just came out, and even some other videos in the works. So if you want to see those videos, definitely make sure to subscribe. As usual guys, if you're interested in the equipment I talk about in this video, or if you want to know what camera gear I use to make these YouTube videos, links are in the description down below. All right, we're gonna go from beginning to end, starting with taking the photos and the equipment you can use to make it easier to get the product photos you're after, as well as how you'll want to edit these photos so that they look good and, more importantly, so that they meet e-commerce product photo criteria. For equipment, you're obviously gonna need a camera, some lighting, a backdrop, and a subject. Today, we're gonna use the Impact Photo Pro LED Booth 400 to help us get our photos. I got this photo booth from B&H Photo specifically because I knew I was going to be shooting some product photos for my merch release and was looking for a semi-compact solution. Which, by the way, www.dzpstore.com, get your merch today, guys, come on. Interestingly enough, this photo booth came in a travel bag that weighed about 35 pounds. While you're not going to be lugging this around all the time, it's nice that it's basically a metal pipe frame with a fabric wrap that can be set up in about under 20 minutes. And it comes with 3 different color backdrops, a very useful white and black backdrop and an aqua-ish blue backdrop. It also comes with 8 of these LED light strips that magnetically attach to the frame to light the backdrop and the subject, and some diffusion material as well. While it does weigh 35 pounds, it does function as a portable solution for product photography to shoot everything from apparel to objects, and even functions as a headshot and portrait photo booth. If you're looking to shoot only smaller objects, you can get product booths similar to this Impact photo booth, but in a smaller size, more compact, and at a cheaper price. Alternatives include this FotodioX LED Studio-In-a-Box for about $115. Now, if you're shooting a lot of portraitures or apparel product photography, you may also be interested in investing in a backdrop kit, like this Impact Pro Backdrop Support Kit for around $250, and pair it with some budget studio lights and paper backdrops. This is definitely a more versatile setup since you'll be able to control where the lights are more easily, control the amount of light spilled onto the background, and move your subject further away from the background. The obvious drawback of this setup is that it may take up more space than you'd like, and it's definitely a lot less portable. If you do go the route of getting a backdrop kit like this, I highly recommend picking up paper backgrounds, like this super white background paper from Savage, because I used to shoot product photos on muslin cloth backgrounds, and I'll tell you something, no matter how long you steam and iron that fabric, it'll never be perfectly smooth. And I always ended up with wrinkles in the fabric, and because we set it up in the garage and that's where it lived its life, it accumulated dust over time and went from white to light gray. Do yourself a favor, go with the paper background. Since we're utilizing this photo booth instead that comes with this plastic background roll, we don't have to worry about any of that. Additionally, the included lighting works well for human subjects when it comes to apparel photography, and it works incredibly well with smaller objects for product photography. As a general rule for product photography in a controlled environment, start with exposing your subject. You can do this by controlling the amount of light that falls onto your subject and making sure that they look good. Once you have your subject properly exposed, you want to dial up the exposure on your backdrop. If you're going for a white background, you'll want to expose the background as much as possible without it spilling onto your subject. Here's a tip for product photos. Since most of them are going to be posted on e-commerce sites like Amazon or Shopify, you'll want to shoot with achieving a 1:1 aspect ratio in mind. But if you're shooting a vertical subject like a person, you can cheat this a little bit. Feel free to focus on capturing as much of them as you need. Then when you edit the photo, since the background is going to be white, you can just add additional white space to the left and right of the photo to achieve that square image. Another tip for product photos, it's tempting to shoot with a shallow depth of field like f1.8, but try to close your aperture down to like f2.8 or f4. Since your background is white anyways, it's best to capture all of your subject from front to back. In this case, a person, you can capture everything from the closest point like their nose to the furthest point like the back of their hair or their ears. This way, everything is in focus and looks very sharp. So now you've captured your product photos, let's talk about how I usually edit them to meet requirements of e-commerce platforms. So let's talk about the criteria you need to meet for some of these sites. I'm gonna use Amazon as an example. These are some of the main criterias. The image must be in focus, professionally lit, and photographed with realistic colors. You need a minimum image pixel dimension of at least 1000 or larger in either height or width. Unless it's cover art like for books and music, which is required to fill 100% of the frame, all other products should fill 85% or more of the image frame. Finally, and usually the hardest part, the background must be pure white, aka RGB 255, 255, and 255. So let's hit all of these requirements. We already talked about getting a focused, well-lit photo. The next bit is realistic colors. The main point here is to make sure that the product looks true to life. Usually the raws out of the camera look a bit undersaturated, lacks a bit of contrast, and maybe slightly off in exposure. So my first step is I take the photo into Lightroom to do some color correction. On top of that, while I'm there, I do some sharpening and light retouching with the healing tool. Once the subject looks true to life and realistic, I export the photo and open up Photoshop. The next criteria is an image size with a minimum edge dimension of 1000 pixels. So personally, I like to create a 2080 by 2080 image so it can be nice and sharp without being too large of a file, but still, especially for products with texture, this lets customers zoom in and inspect some of the details when it's posted on whatever e-commerce site you're gonna have it on. I set the background to white and then drop in my subject photo. I make sure to scale it up so it fits that 85% or more of the frame, basically filling as much of the vertical space with the subject while leaving a small amount of white space at the top or bottom so it doesn't feel too claustrophobic. Now for the harder part, making sure the background is pure white. There's a chance you expose your backdrop so well that it's uniformly overexposed, leaving you with very little to do. Or more likely than not, you have some variation in the white levels in the background that you'll have to address now. Personally, here's what I do to make the background pure white. It's a bit rudimentary, but it's my preferred approach for doing it. First, I use the quick selection tool and start by selecting the white around my subject. Anytime it selects onto my subject, I hold the Alt or Option key if you're on Mac to deselect that part of my subject. Take your time with this step and make sure all of the edges look as clean as possible. You'll want to zoom in real close, especially for anything with fine detail like hair. Now go ahead and press Alt-Shift-I or Option-Shift-I if you're on a Mac. That will invert your selection, so now that instead of selecting the background, you're only selecting the subject itself. Once you've made a decent mask, go ahead and use the Select and Mask option to help refine the mask you've just made by utilizing the Edge Detection, Smooth, Feather, Contrast, and Shift Edges slider. Do this until you feel like you've got as close to a perfect mask as possible and hit OK. Now click the New Mask button at the bottom right side of your Layers panel, and that will create a mask layer. On this mask layer, everything in white is visible, while everything in black is hidden or invisible. I choose this approach over simply deleting the background because this is reversible. With the mask layer selected, you can now use the brush tool and make the final bits of refinement that you need to make sure that all the edges look good. Using a white brush to paint in the part that you want and black brush to paint out any unwanted background elements. And now you're all set. Now you have a product photo with realistic colors, properly filling the image frame, and it's got a pure white background. The beauty of this technique is that you can do this with any amount of equipment. If you can get a perfectly exposed background, you can even skip the masking and the editing phase. But if you have a white background, it'll make removing the background and turning it pure white much easier. But if you have none of the backdrop or lighting equipment, you can still technically take the time to properly mask a subject and put them on a white backdrop. Obviously, the equipment will make your life so much easier, especially if you do this often. But I remember when I was a kid and painted out a background manually in Microsoft Paint over several hours. The result wasn't great, but I was also really impatient. Again, if you want to check out the dope Impact photo booth or any of the equipment I mentioned in this video, check out the links in the description down below. As usual, guys, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and get notified for more content just like this. Let me know in the comment section if this technique was helpful, or if you do product photography yourself, what's your approach to getting a perfectly white background? All right, guys, that's it for this one. I'll see you in the next video. See ya.